Hello. Welcome. I'm Alan Rossi, Chair of the Creative Writing Department. Before we get to this reading, just a couple of things. Please silence cell phones. You can take pictures, but sometimes the sound of the cell phone is distracting to a reader and can throw them off. I'm also supposed to say this. Please make note of exits in case of an emergency. And as I already said, welcome to the Creative Writing Winter Readings for our junior class. To the junior class, look who the cat dragged in. Sorry, I had to say it. It's an inside joke. I apologize. Okay, tonight you'll hear selections of fiction and nonfiction from this group who are just about to complete their first semester at the Governor's School. They've already taken nonfiction with our nonfiction instructor, Scott Gould, right over here. Scott's going to raise his hand. Next quarter, they'll take Emily Cinquemani in poetry, who's also right over here, sitting next to Scott. Currently, they're taking playwriting with Austin Wilson. Austin, I believe, is on a mountain somewhere. And fiction with me at the moment. I've gotten to know this group quite well over the last 7 weeks or so, and I'm impressed by them. I hesitate to say that because I don't want any of them to get big egos, but I'm impressed by the way they think about things. I'm impressed by how well they're able to read very difficult stories that I would teach college students, and interpret them well. And I'm impressed by their general attitude, which is normally, though not always, characterized by a warm-heartedness. But the thing I'm most impressed by is their work ethic. These students have written 3 stories in 7 weeks. One of those is an 8 to 10 page story. They've built up to that. And they've also read copious amounts of fiction. They've written analytical responses to this fiction. It's a ton of writing in a 7-week period, and we're not quite done yet. It doesn't look like this to the outside world, but these writers work incredibly hard. I've seen draft after draft of stories, writers going back to scratch and beginning again, writers digging into stories and pulling out more emotion, developing characters, developing metaphor. It's this hard work that has allowed them to have 3 winners in Young Arts this year. While those winners are individuals, their awards speak to the effort of the class as a whole. What you're about to hear from these students will sound effortless, but please know all the hard work that has gone into creating that effortlessness. So without further ado, our first reader, Sun Clark.
Hi, I'm Sun Clark. I'm from right here in Greenville, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my piece titled The Beholder. I remember our anniversary very clearly. Asheen and I sat together on the beach, a block away from my apartment. We were very close, his head pressed against my head, claustrophobic and nearly cheek to cheek. The water was a cool blue-gray and glossy. I wanted to tell him I loved him, like I had done nearly every other day for a year, but I didn't know how, and I didn't really know why. I would figure it out later. But there, with our heads together, I guess I thought the world was just a little off. The sun was far too close to the shoreline. Red fire streaked into the sky like odd footprints from bloody ghosts. Everything beside us was new and gold and reckoning. I have sand in my eyes, I said. I have sand in my everywhere. Well, keep them open. You have to watch, he said. Sunsets just feel so illicit. I've always loved them. I know, I said. I had learned a lot about Asheen that year. You won't let me forget. I want you to remember the little things about me. If I die tomorrow, the little things. Remember the little things, he said, and he put his hands over my eyes, which I kept blinking. Stop blinking. I'm not going anywhere, I told him, but I think he was less scared of missing me and more scared of me missing him. I just wanted to get the sand out. Time passed until the sun was gone. I looked at the moon for help, and the moon shrugged and rose higher into the sky. Little white stars like beaver teeth poked out in necklaces across the sky. I thought about telling him I loved him. I thought about it in many different angles, different circumstances, but I couldn't do it. It wasn't that the phrase felt false. I did, surprisingly, still love Asheen. I just realized that he wouldn't care whether I loved him or not, that it made no difference, that he was the type of guy to think everyone loved him, that they couldn't help it, that they just had to love him. I guess he thought himself a very lovable guy, so I couldn't say it. That day was too important. I had to see how he'd react to me not saying it. I had to confirm to myself what I already knew, that he wouldn't react at all. Eventually, I pushed Asheen's hands away, and he slid his red head down from the side of my own brown one into the cranny of my neck, but he didn't fit. His sharp chin felt like bad acupuncture. "Please," he said, "tell me the story about the planes again." And I obliged. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Julian Jones. I'm from Fort Mill, South Carolina, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my creative nonfiction piece on Pithy. 3. My dad sits across from me in a torn-up booth in some Panera in Jersey. He spoons his soup into his mouth slowly while I shove every last bit of my sandwich into mine. The avocado inside squishes out and onto my hands. He laughs a little and grimaces as he watches. "Leaving in a few days. I probably won't be able to see you before you move. What do you think you're going to do with your new room?" he asked me while I finished my first half of my melt. He's not looking at me, but his voice cuts short like he can't get out the words, like he can't seem to get the truth out. "I was thinking about painting it if Mother lets me." He raises his eyebrow, looking at me surprised. "What color?" he asks, but I'm sure he's just humoring me. We're both well aware of my mother's hatred for paint, for wallpaper, for anything that seems too permanent. If something can leave a mark, it's an automatic no-go, a done deal. I lift my feet onto the booth, sitting crisscross so our shoes will stop accidentally touching. I grab a napkin and try to wipe the grease and avocado coating my hands. I don't know, I was thinking about a burnt orange. I've seen pictures of orange rooms lately and I really like it. It would look really cool with my posters and everything. My dad snorts at me. "I mean, if she was going to allow you any color, it would never be that one. You know how she feels about orange." I roll my eyes and pick something out from under my nail. "But I mean, it's my room. It's not like she's going to have to see it all the time or whatever. I think it'd be fun. I'd even do it myself. Maybe when you drop me off later, you could put in a good word or something." I wrap up the second half of my sandwich and place it carefully in my bag. I grab his plate and his unfinished bowl of soup and place mine atop of it. "Yeah, but she's the one who's buying the place. What she says go." We smile at each other, and I'm glad when he finishes his food in silence. Divorce makes us quieter. 4. Oranges, also called sweet oranges, are part of the Oreitioidae family, known as the citrus family, which includes common fruits like grapefruits, lemons, and limes. Many scientists believe they originated in the jungles of Australia or the foothills of the Himalayas, but more recent information leads them to believe that they actually came from an ancient Indian plate and later southern central China. These citrus plants go as far back as 25 million years when the Indian subcontinent started rubbing against the continent of Asia, which did create the Himalayas, so scientists weren't completely off. When these two land masses collided with one another, the plates spread throughout Asia, which explains many citrus-like fossils that have been found in southern parts of China. These citrus plants and fossils were evolved, though, which proved the idea that they didn't truly originate in China, but rather migrated towards it in one way or another. Earlier, less evolved species, but still not the original base species of citrus, have been found in the Himalayas. Where these plants grew was crucial to their survival of modern-day fruits. When, millions of years ago, there was a large change in our climate, places like China and the Himalayas became a perfect spot to begin to grow the fruits we know today. And so, they migrated. 5. I hate peeling clementines. I hate the little white things, the pith that jam under my nails. I hate my hands that dry out from the citrusy juice. I hate how, no matter how clean I try to be, my fingers always wind up sticky. Despite all of this, they're my favorite fruit. Often, I grin and bear it, but recently, all I can do is complain. Aiden pushes away his half-full Tupperware container and reaches into my lunchbox. I look at him confused, and he pulls out the clementine from inside, shaking it in his hand. I'm peeling this for you. You haven't finished your lunch. You don't have to do it. I can peel it myself. You're still eating. I try and grab the fruit from him, but he smiles and pulls it away. I have time. You hate it. It's not a big deal. Why would I make you do it? Besides, you get this grossed out look when you peel them. What type of friend would I be if I sit there and let you suffer? Aiden laughs and curves his thumbnail into the weakest spot of the orange. He peels, meticulously tearing off the membrane and separating the orange into 8 pieces, throwing the skin and nerves into the grass behind us. He takes a slice for himself, handing me the other 7. With his mouth full of citrus, he smiles at me. Tax. I'll peel these for the rest of our lives if I get a slice or 2 every once in a while. I take the slice from him, hoping that when I kick him under the table, he understands that it's an affirmation, an agreement, a contract signed, and sticky orange juice.
Hello, I'm Tristan. I'm from West Columbia, South Carolina, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my fiction story, Trading Paint. I hit a red 2014 Nissan Murano on my way home from work last night. I was driving down the street, a quiet road to my neighborhood, a quiet neighborhood to my house, which is quiet too because I live alone. I wasn't going very fast. It was dark and late and raining, and it was a back road that never had any cars past 11 p.m. I didn't even see them until the last second. I think they saw me just before. Their wheels spun helplessly against slick asphalt, and then I hit them. It wasn't a bad crash. I wasn't going very fast. I wasn't planning to drive off, but it was dark, and it was late, and it was raining, and the red 2014 Nissan Murano couldn't see my license plate. I make eggs when I get home. They simmer in the cast iron pan, butter crackling and popping, while I think about what just happened. Honestly, I'm trying to convince myself there's more to it, that I had a really, really good reason for driving away, and that reason is just tucked away in my subconscious somewhere. So I keep at it, try to psychoanalyze myself while pushing the spatula back and forth into eggs that are dangerously close to expiring. The only problem is that I'm a salesperson for big sell stuff, not a psychologist, and I can't tell if the sizzling is me frying my neurons or the butter sloshing around in the pan. I have work tomorrow. The thought prances around my head, swims, I guess, if you want to get literal with cerebrospinal fluid. I glance at my phone on the counter. I pick it up and I text my girlfriend. Something weird happened, I type out. Sent, then seen, then typing. Then she replies, Thanksgiving weird or crackhead weird? I have no idea what she's talking about. Before I reply, she sends another text, or alien weird. Again, before I reply, she sends another text, or sassy weird. I text back, Thanksgiving weird? It quickly sets in, dread washes over me, grim, understanding, but it's too late. She's already elaborated. I read the long, painful sentence. Like when you were 11 and you begged your brother to resurrect the chicken after you found out that the chicken breast came from the actual animal. I wince when she mentions my brother. I haven't been on good terms with him since high school. Not that, I text back. That's not even funny. It is funny, but it's about me, therefore not funny. Oh yeah, of course, she replies. What is it? I hit a car, I type, and I drove away. This time she doesn't text back immediately. I regret sending the message. Tense, I shiver. The kitchen feels titanic and stifling at the same time, but I know better. My kitchen is 120 square feet. The pantry is next to the refrigerator. The linoleum counters are peeling at the corners. The sink is a metropolis of ceramic plates and glass cups. The almost expired eggs are burning in the pan. I snatch it off the eye, ardent, and set it down, flicking the stove off. There goes dinner. I don't even like breakfast, but I was willing to compromise. Doesn't matter now, they're too far gone. I dump the coagulated mass into the garbage, slipping out of the pan, hard residue ossified to the bottom. I find myself thinking it resembles a brain. My phone vibrates in my free hand. Daphne replied. What? I pinched the bridge of my nose, typing out a response with my thumb. I hit a car and drove away. She texts back, let me get dressed, be there soon. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Katrin Mizik. I'm from Utahville, South Carolina, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from a nonfiction piece called Cousin Chronicles. Uh, Character in the story called Dominique is my cousin. On Dominique's 16th birthday, my family and I went on a 40-minute road trip to Savannah, Georgia. It was a cramped ride, and I don't remember much else about the driver who I rode with other than Dominique. After passing enough trees and cars on the neighboring lanes, I went to sleep, and once I woke up, the car doors were already open. Everyone stretched their limbs under the beaming sun. I looked at the building, which looked a bit like a warehouse, except its awning was orange, and it seemed weird to me. I asked the adults where we were, but they were entangled in their own adult conversations and didn't hear me. As we walked inside, I realized we were in a roller skating rink. I'd never been inside one before, but I wanted to ever since I first saw them in movies. My aunt handed me my skates, tan with orange heels. Dominique took his skates from the counter after me, and they looked the same, but obviously much larger. I saw people skating on the floor, much bigger and taller than me, and I was intimidated. My excitement faded. I sat on the bench, rolling my skates back and forth on the floor with glowing carpet designs. It was space-themed with falling stars and neon sparkles. "Come on," Dominique called to me. I looked up and followed. He skated a couple laps around me, forward and backward. It almost seemed like he was flying. I held onto the thick wall that bordered the rink with my right hand and stepped slowly, watching him skate with everyone else. He came around again, skating at my pace this time. "I'll help you," he said. "It's fun." He reached for my left hand, and I held his just as tight as I did the wall. Slowly, he pulled me away from it. I stopped moving my feet, afraid I would fall, but he skated faster, forcing me to do the same. He moved with a rhythm I didn't know how to follow, but it felt good to try. My eyes moved from my feet to the space in front of me, the passing people and the arcade machines outside of the rink. I'd never moved through the wind this quickly. As scared as I was, I laughed. I glanced at him and saw his smile. His normally clear braces looked neon green under the lights. I spent my first grade summer break at my grandmother's house. She watched the evening news in the living room while the radio sang gritty country songs. I sat in Dominique's room and watched boy band music videos and parodies. He didn't live here anymore, but the room still felt like his, lit by a pink-colored floor lamp. Bored of the music, I decided I'd call someone, maybe my aunt, because she always answered my calls. But this time, though, she didn't, and so I resumed the music videos. Boring. I took a chance and called Dominique. I hadn't expected him to answer because he was away for the summer doing whatever teenage boys did during summers. But he answered. He was at a friend's house, packing up what seemed like a beach bag. "What's up?" he smiled, holding a striped beach towel. I waved, happy to finally talk with someone who wasn't an adult. I hadn't gone out to play with my friends since school ended. I was bored without him, I think. He told me about his plans to go to a nearby beach the next day with friends. I wished I could come, but I knew I couldn't. He was older and so were his friends. I'd be out of place. I hoped that I could go to the beach with him one day and maybe he could teach me how to swim. I went back home with my mother that Saturday. The drive was about an hour long. We lived in a suburban neighborhood on the edge of Summerville, South Carolina. The house was light blue and small, and it had an even smaller driveway. I spent most of my time in the living room with my 4 siblings that afternoon, playing on our shiny black sofa with peeling faux leather. My mother, in her bedroom, yelled my name as if I was in trouble. Woos echoed from my brothers and sister. I stood beside her, keeping about a yard of distance. She sighed and looked at me. "Okay, so Dominique died." Short and bitter. I left the room quietly, walked to the couch, and curled myself into a ball. That was the first time I felt death so closely. Grief burst in me like a water balloon, and after that splash, I felt nothing more. Short and bitter. At the funeral, the wails poured from my older family members' throats and made my chest ache. I wanted to sob as they did, to have more of him to cry about. I think I was more sad about the fact that I just wasn't. I tried uprooting my memories of him to evoke the somber emotions I wanted to feel, but I was only met with disappointment each time. I became almost jealous of everyone else there, and I probably wouldn't have been if I'd been taught how to swim out there.
Hi, my name is Nina Rodriguez. I'm from Indian Land, South Carolina, and I'll be reading an excerpt from my short story, Temperance. Xander woke up with the sky, the early morning light spilling through his curtains and painting his bedroom a pale yellow. Reginald, his family's old rooster, let out his loud crow just as Mighty, his St. Bernard, jumped up and looked at his face. Xander let out a huff, ruffling Mighty's floppy ears and tilting his head away from his slobbery mouth. "Hey, boy," he said, his voice still thick with sleep. "Come on, let's go outside." He pushed his blankets off and wiped at the dog drool with his sleeve before he sat up to grab his glasses off his nightstand. Mighty's claws tapped against the wooden floors as Xander guided him down the stairs and out the back door, watching him bound after a few birds singing on the dewy grass with a sharp bark. Xander shimmied his feet into his Converse and walked into the dawn. He grabbed a bucket of feed and tossed a fistful to the chickens, who clucked and chirped around his feet, scrambling to get their fill. Xander grabbed the egg basket and rooted through the chicken coop before he heard a quiet knock on the coop's roof. "Xander," somebody called. "Xander, are you in there?" Xander let out a sigh and shifted the basket further up his arm before he pushed the coop's door open. "Good morning, Sadie," he said, watching the young girl run after Mighty and the chickens, still in her nightgown. She stumbled to a stop and waved at him. "Good morning, Xander. Did your mother need more eggs or something?" Xander asked, holding the basket up higher for her to see. "I got plenty more in the house if she does." "She said she needed your dad to come over and check the fence again," Sadie said, out of breath, because Mr. Hermie's dog chewed through it again. Her head whipped around and her dark pigtails followed before she looked over and frowned at him. "Where's he at?" "He's asleep," he sighed, stuffing his hands into his pockets and tilting his head to look down at her. "But I'll be sure to let him know." He reached a hand down and patted her shoulder, and she smiled. Xander wasn't actually sure if his father was still asleep, but he knew he was still locked away in his room, just like he'd been for the past 2 months since the funeral. Xander's mother, Jane, had passed away in the hospital 3 months ago. Xander's father had seemed fine while he was organizing the funeral, while he gave the eulogy, and while they lowered the casket. But in the time since, he'd become a shell of himself, passing through the house like a phantom. Mighty squeezed past Xander into the kitchen, rushing into his father's room and scratching at the door. Surprisingly, the door actually opened, and Xander's father, Jonathan, was standing there in his greasy tank top and boxers, a sour smell piercing the air. "Aren't you supposed to be at school?" he asked, his voice raspy after not being used for such a long time. "It's Sunday." "Oh." Xander shifted his weight to his other foot, watching as Mighty circled around Jonathan, his fluffy tail wagging and thumping on the doorframe. "You should shower," Xander said, "if you're going to church today." Jonathan sighed, scratching at his salt and pepper beard before running a hand through his unwashed hair. It used to be a nice sandy blonde like Xander's, but was now a yellowish shade of white. "I'm not sure if I will." Xander clicked his tongue and walked towards the fridge to put the eggs away. "Mrs. Carlson sent Sadie over, asked for you to look at her fence again. Tell her I'll get to it sometime." Sometime. He'd tend to the garden sometime. He'd make breakfast sometime. He'd pay the water bill sometime. Xander's nose crinkled and he clicked his tongue again. There was no further response from Jonathan, but Xander knew he'd retreated back into his bedroom when Mighty let out a low whine. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Jaden Benenhaley. I am from Fort Mill, and I will be reading an excerpt from a fiction piece named You Call It a Better Place. Samantha was also new to my regular school that year, and every day when our church's steeple bell rang at noon, we kids across the way at school would leave the arched cover onto an asphalt parking lot where we played basketball and talked and did irrelevant near-nothings until the bell rang again. It was that time of the year where autumn gets just a bit too cold to not wear a jacket, but some may go without them anyways, when we saw it. Samantha, Matthew, and I all huddled around a dead bird. Its body was skewed upward, its wing lay outstretched, revealing its decomposing chest. "Ew," said Samantha. "Someone get a stick, I want to move it," said Matthew. He had hardly finished this thought before he was looking through the grass across the street. "Maybe we should bury it," said Samantha. "It needs a funeral." "I don't think we should move it. We should tell a teacher," I said. "Come on, Anthony. The teacher will just tell us to leave it alone. We need to help it." "Help it? It's already dead. How can we help it?" "My mom told me that people give funerals to respect the dead and get them into heaven," said Samantha. "Oh." It was at this moment that Matthew came back holding 2 forearm-length sticks taken from under a white oak. One of the sticks curved at the end, giving it an almost candy cane-like shape, and the other divided at the end into a Y. He handed me the candy cane. "Matthew, we're going to give it a funeral," I said. "Well, we still have to move it. We can't just dig in the road here," I said. Carefully, I slid the crook of the candy cane stick under the bird, while Matthew pinned it in a bit more firmly with the other stick's Y. We then lifted the bird and started taking it back under the white oak. As Matthew and I went closer to the grass, I dropped it. The bird slipped from under the crook of the half stick and into the grass. Wordlessly, I picked up the bird by its feet and half ran towards the base of the tree while looking at it. The bird had begun to decay, sure, but it was not as disgusting as you might think. The poor thing must not have died too long ago. "I'll be back," said Samantha. She ran back towards the school. Matthew and I had just reached the base of the tree when I bent down and dropped the bird. We righted ourselves and looked at each other. I don't know what he made of me, but I could see doubt in his eyes. "Are we just going to dig a hole?" he asked. "I guess so." We waited for another moment. Matthew prodded the bird. Eventually, Samantha came back holding a fistful of late purple aster flowers, small wild flowers with thin petals and a giant yellow center. They had obviously begun to wilt in the cold weather, but had somewhat opened back up in the midday warmth. "What are you doing with those?" I asked. "You need flowers at a funeral," she said. Matthew and I exchanged another glance. It was obvious that neither of us had much of an understanding of funerals. I know Matthew better than I knew Samantha because Matthew had been going to church longer. On the other hand, Samantha had only started going there at the start of the school year. I remember the adults talking about her family. Good people. Need some guidance. Yes, I heard. Isn't it terrible? Poor girl. Several times I had thought to ask about this to my mother, but I had always decided against it. I kneeled down along the above-ground root and started pushing the dirt up towards the tree. Matthew joined in soon after, and we began digging. It wasn't too difficult. The earth right around the base of the tree was lightly softened, and in turn, the grave was pushed right under a root. "What now?" Matthew asked Samantha. "Now we cover him up," she said. "We have to be kind and pray," I said. "Why? He's already dead." Samantha and I stood quietly for a moment. "We just have to," she finally said, "to get it to heaven." Matthew remained silent, and we all prayed. Not long after an amen, the church's bell rang once more. We had already been rather far from the school, but to leave our now departed friend behind slowed us more. We were the last kids to get back into school that day, much to our teacher's frustration. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ellie. I'm from Anderson, South Carolina, and I will be reading a nonfiction piece titled Asterism. March 2013, Conyers, Georgia, my mom's first tattoo. Her friend wanted a girls' night in lieu of a baby shower, so the three of them, Wendy, Adora, and Jamie, went for pedicures. The way she tells the story, my mom noticed Adora's tattoo, and Adora said the shop was right around the corner. They went on a whim, but my mom had wanted a tattoo for years. The artwork consisted of 3 inked-in stars aligned vertically along the bone between the arch of her foot and her big toe. A star for each of her 3 children, my older brother, myself, and my newborn sister. I noticed the stylized center star, marginally larger than the others, and latched onto it. When my mom drove me to and from preschool, I would insist that I was the middle star. Its size meant I was, secretly, her favorite, and she loved me more than my siblings. I kept pestering her about it. I don't know how I didn't drive her crazy. Maybe I did. At some point, though, I wore her out, and she ceded my point. I'm sure she worded it cleverly, but in my journal, I wrote something to the effect of, "Mom said she loves me more than everyone, but I have to keep it a secret." Below, I drew crayon stick figures of my mom and me surrounded by a heart. In 3rd grade, every student created a curiosity project for Miss Brown's science class. We chose a subject, researched it, and presented it. I picked 3 constellations: Cassiopeia, the vain Greek queen; Cygnus, the swan; Ursa Major, the great bear. When I felt prepared to start my presentation, I showed my facts to my mom, expecting a cursory look over. Instead, I received overwhelming enthusiasm. We drove to Staples for a black trifold. Kohl's was next door, and we wandered into the shoe section like always. My mom found a pair of white sneakers with star cutouts in my size. She said, "If you like these and you'll wear them, I'll buy them for you." I wore them until they rubbed blisters into my heels. The stars reminded me of the tattoo on her foot. Whenever I wore the shoes, I thought of her saying, "I love you most." On the day of, my mom drove me to school as she did every Friday. She couldn't stay for my presentation, but she did hold up the car line to hug me and wish me luck. My years in Girl Scouts were nothing but a pain in the ass for everyone involved. We met every Tuesday on the other side of town at Parkwood Baptist Church at 6 p.m., and the meetings lasted an hour. On the way home, my mom and I would stop at Quick Trip. Regardless of the weather, our order stayed the same: a cookies and cream steamer for me and a whoopie pie for each of us. Our time together was half the reason I stuck with Girl Scouts. One night in the middle of winter, after we drove home, my mom stood in the driveway to stargaze. The sky was cloudless, the moon was new, and no home had its lights on. I'd left my jacket inside, but I stood at her side and shivered as she identified constellations and planets. My mom told me, "Orion is my favorite constellation because it was the first one I learned to spot." She wanted to get a tattoo of it in addition to her stars, she said, hidden among the freckles on her arm. I guess kind of like a shibboleth, she added. I didn't recognize the word, and at that point, I cared about one thing and one thing only. "My favorite is Cassiopeia because she spends half the year with her skirt over her head," I said, rubbing my arms. "It's cold. Can we go inside now?" My mom said to go ahead, but I stayed until my teeth chattered audibly. This she noticed, and she finally shooed me inside. During my sophomore year of high school, I spent most mornings rushing around the house and abstaining from my breakfast in my haste. On the second day of May, while I was shoving everything within reach into my lunchbox, my mom made me a Hot Pocket. When she handed it to me, she asked, apropos of nothing, "When are we getting our tattoos?" "What?" I answered, and I took the Hot Pocket from her. "I don't know. Dad's already in the car. I love you, bye." I didn't hug her in my hurry. In the car, I Googled the lawful age to tattoo someone in South Carolina. I texted my mom, "It's illegal to tattoo a minor in South Carolina, even with parental consent." She replied, "North Carolina?" When I returned home that afternoon, we talked about what we'd get tattooed. We sat on the couch, my mom with her feet propped up on the ottoman, her stars visible between the straps of her sandals. "I want Orion," she said, and she pointed out where she'd place it on her upper arm. "Then I'll get Cassiopeia," I decided. I've always wanted a tattoo, and Cassiopeia seems a simple one. It contains an asterism of 5 stars in the shape of a W. Like a shibboleth, my mom had said. Like a password for the two of us. I love you most. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jalen Gill. I'm from Edgefield, South Carolina, and I'll be reading a piece of fiction titled More If You Want It. "Check your window, Brooke. You've got a car." Charlie's voice was loud. Somehow I could hear it all the way from across the kitchen. An old blue car sat outside my window. The man driving looked about middle-aged and wore an employee uniform for the nearby gas station. There was trash piled up in his passenger seat, so much so that it spilled onto the floorboards. He reeked of weed, and I wanted him away from my window as soon as possible. "Hi, what can I do for you?" I tried to sound polite, though by the 5th hour of a shift, it was difficult. "One chocolate milkshake." He'd already got his card out and was waving at me. "What size?" "Normal size." I considered this briefly before hitting medium, hoping that would be normal enough for this guy. I took his card, swiped it, and handed it back to him. He pulled away before I could even ask if he wanted his receipt. "Brooke, take your break." Charlie's voice came through my headset this time. She must have gotten hers back on. I didn't bother replying. I just clocked out for a break and waved to her as soon as I got to the dining room. I wasn't the only one on break. One of the grill guys was also there. He was a few years older than me, though I didn't know his name. I was sure he'd told me when I first started working there, but I'd forgotten it and had been too scared to ask for it again. He was friendly, though, so I figured making small talk wouldn't hurt. I sat across from him at the table closest to the kitchen, the one employees usually ate at on break. "Hey, how's your shift going?" "It's been fine, kind of busy, though." I glanced at the counter, seeing the ticket for my order and knowing it would be a few minutes before someone bothered filling it. I get that. Backdrive's not been the best either. People always think I want to steal their card or something. A loud beep blared from the kitchen, indicating that something had finished cooking. It sounded again. No one bothered to take it out. "Oh, that's annoying. Have you ever had someone try and say you took their card?" Another beep. It'd be burnt soon. "Nah. Someone said Emily did, though. They came back in, huffing and puffing. After yelling at Charlie, she checked the cameras and saw them putting the card in their bag. Crazy, isn't it?" 2 more beeps. It was definitely burnt. I heard Charlie yell from the kitchen and knew I wouldn't be getting my food anytime soon. He noticed too, looking over at the kitchen. "They burnt the nuggets? How did they do that? They're the easiest thing to take out. Just pull out the tray and you're good." Is that what it was? Damn, I ordered some. Guess it'll be a while before my food comes out. The beeping stopped, and there was a loud sizzle as someone put more nuggets in the fryer. Both of us were quiet for a moment before he asked the default question most of my coworkers asked each other when we ran out of things to say. "So, how'd you end up working here?" I hesitated a bit, thinking about my answer. "Well, I didn't need a job exactly, just kind of wanted some extra cash, and jobs in high school look good on college applications. You?" "Oh, I'm a dropout. Been working here 2 years now. Don't think I'll be leaving anytime soon." I didn't know what to say to that at first. Why not? You can do more if you want. No one's making you stay here. Surely you know someone who could get you a better job. I could see his brow furrow and his lips curl into a scowl. Are you serious? You don't know what my life has been like so far. Who are you to judge me? He stood up and went back into the kitchen. I sat there, shocked by what he'd said. He was the one that brought it up to begin with, I thought. It wasn't like I'd asked him out of nowhere. What could he have possibly been through to make him so defensive? Thank you.
Hi, I'm T. Robinson. I'm from Greenwood, South Carolina, and I'll be reading an excerpt of a short piece of fiction I wrote entitled Roommates. Just laid on the floor of Chris's dorm, sprawled out like a starfish, she sighed, exasperated. So what's the problem? Chris asked, looking down at Jess from her bed, giving her a small, sympathetic smile. Girl, Jess said, you're honestly so lucky your roommate left. You know, the reason why she left isn't all that lucky. Yeah, but it's at least better than rooming with Bianca. Chris doubted that. She was pretty close with Bianca and couldn't see any obvious problems that would come with being roommates with her, besides her occasional perfectionism. And not having a roommate for 2 months, especially after when Chris's roommate had left, wasn't as fun as Jess speculated it would be. What problems would you have with Bianca? Okay, don't get too mad, because I know y'all are kind of friends and everything, Jess said, moving to sit up against Chris's desk. But I don't like her, at all. Okay, don't get... What'd she do? Chris asked, genuinely curious. The girl won't ever talk to me, and even when she does, she is so incredibly dry in her responses towards me. Even when I'm just like, how was your day? I always get a fine or okay, maybe a good every once in a while. But that's it. Well, what do you want her to do? Give you a play-by-play of every single thing she did that day? Chris said. Maybe. It will be better than what she's doing now. Just brought her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them. I just want her to talk to me how she used to. Chris also missed having someone to talk to. She liked talking to Jess on occasion, but their friendship wasn't what it used to be since they had gotten to high school. And while Chris did have Bianca right across the hall, she still missed Lila. They would stay up for hours talking about anything they could think of. Couple drama, their hot history teacher, their old schools, their family problems, their futures. They sometimes crawl into the same bed and gossip on and on until they passed out next to each other. Eventually, some nights became every night, and Chris never had to sleep alone. But since Lila was gone, Chris had to settle for Jess or Bianca coming to her room every once in a while to chat. You know, it wasn't always like this. She used to have full, real conversations with me where she'd say more than 3 words the whole time. Just threw her head back. I don't know what happened. Did you do something? What? No, I'm a good roommate. I clean the dorm most of the time. I remind her to get her work done. I reach out and try to talk to her, Jess explained, getting louder. Okay, I was just offering a possible explanation, Chris said, leaning back a little out of surprise. And wait, isn't your room super messy? Okay, well, don't call me out on that. Dude, girl, that's not the point. The point is I have been working on it, but I've just been a little unmotivated lately, Jess said. Chris gave her a skeptical look, a smirk on her face. Okay, if you say so. Don't judge me, okay? I felt like crap for 2 weeks now. Jess started, standing up now and getting louder. My girlfriend won't hang out with me, and she isn't answering any of my calls. And my mom and stepdad are on my butt about my goddamn physics grade, and just, it's an entire mess. Oh, I get that I've been a little moody or whatever, but Bianca knows what I'm going through. I told her about all this stuff a little while ago, and she seemed to understand, and even relate at the time. But now it's like I'm getting zero sympathy from her, like everybody's labeled me as dirt, never to be cared about or taken seriously. Jess's face looked more solemn. She plopped down on the floor and put her head in her hands. I don't think Bianca feels that way about you, Chris said, looking down at Jess sincerely. And you know, I think she's just going through her own stuff too. It's probably not even anything against you. Jess sighed, lifting her head out of her hands. Yeah, I guess, she said. They both sat in silence. Chris didn't know what else to say. She never really knew how to respond to people when they vented to her. Whenever Lila would go off about how strict and controlling her parents were, Chris would always just try to relate by talking about her own problems with her parents. They'd go back and forth about their trauma, trying to make each other feel better somehow. Chris felt conversations always flowed easily with Lila, but she knew Jess would never want to hear about her own struggles with abandonment, so she stayed quiet. She'll probably be back in the dorm, so I should just go have my alone time while I can, Jess said, getting off of the floor of Chris's dorm. She opened up her arms for Chris to come hug her, and Chris slid off her bed to get down and hug Jess. Just give her some space, okay? Chris said. I'll try. Jess let go of the embrace and sluggishly left the room. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lil Oxenrider, and I'll be reading an excerpt from my fiction. I'm from Gilbert, by the way. I'll be reading an excerpt from my fiction story, $800 and a Dream. This is kind of in the middle of the story, so for context, this guy works at a grocery store. Okay. I'm in the break room sitting at a round table with rickety pull-out chairs, eating a turkey sandwich. The same turkey sandwich as yesterday and the day before that, and maybe my turkey sandwich has been around since the dawn of time. It's immortal and comes back every day for me to eat it again. Its whole life depends on being eaten. It's sad, I think, as I sink my teeth into its white flesh of bread. My coworkers Angie and Jane come into the break room and they're talking. Angie throws open the fridge with a huff and grabs her salad. Her salad is nothing but lettuce. She's a large woman and believes lettuce is fat erasure. Jane leans against the wall and Angie faces her. Angie's mother works at the hospital. She shakes her head and hums in an unfortunate way, like stabbing a piece of lettuce and it crunches. I gotta leave early today, Angie says and takes a bite. My mama needs a daughter's touch. I stop chewing to listen as Angie speaks. She tells Jane her mother just lost a patient, someone she grew close to, and it's hitting her hard. The hospital gave her the day off. Angie's mother wants to make her dinner and kiss her on the cheek and ask her about life. She wants to care for someone who won't die on her. When she called to tell me what happened, she was just crying, Angie says with a mouthful. Hearing your mother cry is like a punch to the gut, you know? She just started bawling and telling me all this stuff. She talked about her patients, too. When I was younger, death was like taking something horrible away. It was a gift. It took my abusive dad in an overdose, saving my mom and me. The two of us had stood together at the funeral, heads bowed, not mourning, but thanking, I don't know who, maybe God, for our rescue. Death makes people kind. It also makes people notice you. People tell fond stories, cry, and say kind things at funerals. It seems like the act of dying erases your horrible deeds with you, not from people's minds, but from their mouths, so they spread nothing of you but good. I've never thought much about death as pain. But now Angie talks about her grieving mother, and I imagine the poor nurse pleading for her daughter, like a little girl. I'm sitting perfectly still and thinking. On their way out of the room, Jane stops to look at me and she says, "Are you eavesdropping, creep?" My body tremors with excitement. She actually notices me. I turn my head towards the women with a smile, and sandwich bits fall out of my mouth. They leave. I feel so happy just now that I wonder if dying is the right choice after all. My name would be mentioned a few times, and people would say it was a shame. Poor employee, poor man, what a shame. But no one would immortalize my name. People can't read each other's minds. They know as much as they're told, and what they know is all that exists to them. I don't say much. Not much of me belongs to the world. As I'm sitting here with a bite of half-chewed sandwich in my mouth, I'm realizing that dying while being unknown is like a smudge being wiped off glass. Slightly more clear, less crowded, but forgotten after it's cleaned away. I go to the bathroom and lock the door. This desire isn't about suicide. I don't want to die if it means I'll be forgotten. I want to be seen, for people to revisit the thought of me and feel something, hatred or love. I want the sun to eat the last of us up, and as it consumes me, it says that it knows me, small but unmistakably me, and I won't die with life draining out of me. The life will fill me so much that I burst. Thank you.
Oh, I don't want to. Okay, it didn't fall. Hi, my name is Amelia Squires. I'm a junior creative writer from Columbia, South Carolina, and I will be reading an excerpt from a nonfiction piece I've called An Ugly Girl's Guide to Feeling Pretty. 1. Start with your face. Notice what people think is pretty. Notice other girls. Compare everything you find different. Your nose. Look at the size of it, not the slope, but the nostrils. Stand in front of your mirror, squeeze the sides of it, and imagine what it would be like to have a smaller nose, like other girls. Your cheeks, run a finger along your jaw, and wish you didn't still have your baby fat. Tap the sides of your face, think of how much sleeker the faces of other girls look. Tell yourself that these cheeks make you look like a child. You do not want to look like a child. Your acne. Pick at the small scabs forming new on your face. Look around to other girls, even your own sister. See how they have perfectly clear skin. Despite these things, ignore the voice in your head. Ignore when it tells you that you wish you could change. Ignore it because that's the best you can do right now. 2. Avoid mirrors. Looking into them, you see someone you don't recognize. Look at the way the light dances in her hair, making the brown curls look almost golden. Look at her cracked and bloody lips that by all means should be ugly, but for some reason just make her seem alive. Look at her eyes, how they seem to shift in color every time she turns her head, going from brown to green and back again. Look at this girl and tell yourself, she is not you. Don't let yourself believe you are her, that you could be her. Remind yourself you cannot ever hope to be what she is. Avoid mirrors because the lies they tell you are too sweet, too hopeful. Feel your heart squeeze when you're reminded of the truth again. You must always remember, mirrors are liars. 3. Notice the shape of your body. Notice the shape of other people's bodies. When a boy in your 6th grade English class tosses out the word fat, like a slur, look at who he's talking about. Compare her to you. Internalize these things. Think that maybe being pretty starts with the body. Your friends will say you're skinny when you talk about it, but ignore them. Know that there are girls skinnier than you. See them walking down the hall, and for the first time, feel jealous. Let that pull in your stomach, let it motivate you. Get home that day, and before you get in the shower, look in the glass. The door to the shower is clear, so squint your eyes to make out the outline of your body. Look and think about the other girls you wish you looked like. Unslump your shoulders. Slouching your shoulders makes your stomach jut out. Realize this is a bad thing. Dash into the shower. Realize. Look down at yourself. You look fat. 4. Get into fashion. The clothes will hide the shape of your body. Well, at least the clothes that you should start to wear outside should. Wear high-waisted pants that have just the slightest tightness to them. These will hug your skin and, in turn, tuck in your stomach. Make sure they never slip down during the day. Don't let your stomach show. Wear looser shirts, too. Hoodies are best because they rarely cling to your form at all. Only wear tight shirts, like turtleneck sweaters, when you have those high-waisted pants on. Notice that the pants contain your stomach, while the shirts accentuate it. Don't let them accentuate anything. When you're at home, though, wear tight clothing. Keep reminding yourself of what it is that you're trying to hide. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Corinne Glenn, and I'm from Fort Mill, South Carolina. I'll be reading an excerpt from a short story called What Are You Waiting For? I stared at the Polaroids on my wall until I memorized each of their overexposed details. My dress shoes were propped above my headboard as I laid on my bed. I looked at the pictures my mom took that were taped on the wall. In the far left corner, I saw my dad at his last marathon. My brother Dante and I hugged him in an awkward preteen side hug. My eyes showed down to a photo of Sage's 7th birthday party that was slightly lifted from the wall. I sat next to her with a party hat sat on top of my short curls while she blew out the candles on her ice cream cake. Another one was of my brother at his football team's regional championships. They won. It was his last game of the year, and it was a time where he hadn't committed to a college yet. Dante and number 11 had a hand on a golden plaque as both of them smiled from ear to ear, their helmets in their arms and to their sides. Most of Dante's friends went to a party that night, which left him to stay home. Mom chose to sleep instead of dealing with Dad's absence, and I was holed up in my room to do calculus homework. There was a knock on my door before it creaked open to reveal Dante. "What are you doing here?" I asked as I put a pencil between the pages of my textbook. He looked between me and my mountain of work and anxiously shifted his weight between his feet. "Do you want to go somewhere?" he asked, scanning the insides of my room as if it was his first time seeing it. I thought for a minute, weighing my options before saying, "Sure." I got up from the bed and stumbled over to my closet to slip on a hoodie. "I've got the keys," he said, as he twirled them around his finger. I listened to the jangling while I tied my shoes. The beginning of the car ride was silent. I looked out the window for something interesting. The most prominent thing I saw was my reflection, but my skin blended into the dark and my eyes are what peered back at me. I stared at myself, the trees, and my brother. He had one hand on the steering wheel and the other tapped on the electronic panel of a dashboard. Dante turned through stations. He stopped when he got to a 90s R&B and a song started to play. He turned the volume up. The bass vibrated against my seat as he sang both parts of the song about a woman getting cheated on. He danced in his seat, his shoulder pushed against mine until I could feel the cold glass of the window on the side of my face. "Keep your eyes on the road," I said, while I pushed him back into his seat and reached over his arm to turn the volume down. I looked away to hide the smile on my face. "Not my fault you don't like fun," he said. He turned to a small parking lot that was in front of the brick restaurant. Red awnings drooped above the windows that spanned most of the wall. The bright fluorescence inside the restaurant shone on the dashboard and into the car. We stepped out. The fall air sent a shiver down my spine. The door opened with a ring, and Dante walked over to a cashier while I stared at the faded menu that was taped to the counter. "Arian, what you want?" I looked up to answer, but he cut me off. "You know what? Let me pick for you. I promise it's going to be good." We sat down, and after a few moments of silence, a waitress gave us our food. "Do you still have that camera?" he asked, as he put mustard from a rib packet onto the patty of his burger. "The one for Mom?" I asked, as I poked a slightly soggy fry he gave me. "Yeah," he said, still focused on his food. "I do. Haven't used it." A green neon open sign, blinking lights had flashed in my peripheral vision. "Then why do you have it? I mean, what are you waiting for?" He took a bite of his burger. I looked past him. I stared at the cashier finishing up an order. "Come on, man, take a pic of me." He crossed his arms to pose. "What? Am I not pretty enough to be your muse?" I reached into my book bag, my elbow knocked over the fries, and they sprawled out of their box and onto the gray table. I snapped a picture of him. The lights in the background were flushed out into pure black from the camera flash. His already dark eyes were given a green tint. His eyes turned to shiny black pools that lacked pupils but were filled with emotion that I wish I identified in the moment. He smiled and his white teeth glistened. His eyebrows were covered by strands of dreads that peeked out from under the hoodie. An oil-stained bag sat crumpled up next to him, and my fries poked into the frame. "Thank you."
Hello, my name is Louisa Jane, and I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. Today, I'll be reading a nonfiction piece called Smoke Down My Throat. Afia Sayeda sits next to me on the dirty marble steps of the Charleston County Public Library, located a block or so from Marion Square. She is watching me choke on my words. There might be a gentle hand on my back, but other than that, she sits with her eyes fixed on a homeless man waddling by with a shopping cart full of blankets. Cicadas hum, and she pulls out a cigarette she stole from her dad's truck. Usually, she says, she just resorts to smoking cigarette butts from the side of the interstate. It's easy to believe after watching her drink Mountain Dew from half-empty bottles behind chain-link fences and pour box wine into her water bottle mid-homeroom. Anyway, this untouched, fully fledged cigarette is a rare treat, one she is willing to share with me. I've never smoked before, but I am fascinated as she pulls out a red Bigelow lighter and flicks it with a delicate precision. She smiles at my wide-eyed naivete, her half-rotten teeth peeking out from clammy lips. Her teeth are so damaged from all the time she's made herself throw up, from the acid. At least, that's what she says. She holds the cigarette to her mouth. I watch as she inhales, exhales. A puff of smoke shifts through the summer heat. The squeak of the homeless man's shopping cart begins to fade. She passes me the cigarette, and I pray I won't cough. I don't. It's not that strange of a feeling, not at first. The act of smoking itself is what really grips me, more so than any psychoactive properties wrapped in the thin paper. The cigarette rests gently between two fingers, then gently on my bottom lip. Inhale, exhale. Watch the smoke dissipate among a haze of humidity. It's clear she doesn't care if we're seen, but after every puff, I carefully scan our barren surroundings. The scene is strikingly post-apocalyptic, like everyone just up and left. Everyone but us. The sky is soft, the kind of blue that makes Sophia's brown eyes pop, and the clouds are puffy, like our smoke got stuck in the sky. Eventually, I lean back. I try not to think of all the feces and piss and vomit and bacteria on those library steps. It's easier not to when she passes the cigarette back to me. I glance at my phone and debate telling my dad to pick me up at 7, not 6. She's leaving at 6, but what if I still smell like smoke by then? If I get an hour to myself, I can walk along the waterfront and I can listen to Riot Girl bands from the 90s, and surely by then I'd smell fine. She's talking in my ear, but I don't exactly hear her. Her words sound far away. She rambles something about another one of her boyfriends. This one is the oldest yet, 34. She meets him in church parking lots for grotesque sex, apparently. I can't help but imagine she cries afterwards, but she'd never say that. She passes the cigarette back to me, and I suddenly become very aware of where her mouth has been. But I'm too tired to care, and I let it linger between my lips. I meet her eyes as she's speaking and take another breath. A car whizzes by, my stomach turns. It's the nausea. Inhale, exhale. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ellison Peace. I'm from here in Greenville, South Carolina, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from a piece called Boundaries. It's fiction, called Boundaries in Every Aspect of His Life. Enzo had come to treat house hunting as a sport. His parameters were prohibitively specific, and so he'd spent the last 6 months in earnest pursuit of a house that didn't exist, familiarizing himself with the process until it was reduced to a formula. He struggled with his work-life balance, struggled, in fact, with the drawing of boundaries in every aspect of his life. He did not want a home office for the same reason he had not wanted a glassed-in porch. Lines were blurred in both rooms. Indoors and outdoors had not been clear enough in their separation. He could not reconcile the room's dirt floor with its air conditioning. In reality, he had not wanted a house at all. His house hunt came about more from a sense of obligation than any actual desire. He was motivated by the apprehension of a very specific scenario. His mother would be coming over, he did not know for what. She would not tell him in the scenario, and she would be lying if she did. She always had an ulterior motive, and he had learned a long time ago that her explanations were superfluous, even to her. If she came over for tea, she would make no pretenses, getting immediately to her ultimate point. She would ask if he had put any thought towards the prospect of marriage, and he would reply that no, he hadn't, and that he was waiting. She would ask what he was waiting for, and he would not have an answer. The question of his marriage, her perennial concern, was motivated by the assumption, incorrect, that Enzo was gay, an impression not helped by the amount of time he had allotted to the hunting of his house. She assumed that he had spent this excess of time actively searching. Her worries might have been assuaged with the knowledge that he had spent the vast majority of the past 6 months worrying about her impending visit, and about the world's rapid encroachment on his life. Her visit was fast approaching. Enzo knew this, knew that she could arrive at any point over the coming days, and he busied himself with sweeping. The house would have to be fairly presentable for her visit. He found this margin of presentability a difficult line to toe, for if his surroundings were made too presentable, she would think he was gay. And if she thought he was gay, she would ask him further questions regarding the possibility of his marriage. He could not have this, and so he settled on sweeping alone. Recognizing that she must be unable to find fault with the quality of his sweeping, he limited himself to the sweeping of only one room, the living room. It was the largest room in his house, and if his mother ventured beyond its borders, he would have to stop her, and that would be that. Enzo cleaned defensively, covering all bases as they occurred to him. He had planned to ask that she remove her shoes before she entered so as not to dirty the floor. People who do not permit outside shoes in their inside homes seem to have about them an air of certain noble disinterest, and it was this air of ineffable surety that he wished to cultivate. If she removed her shoes and found his floors clean, her assumption would not be that he took great pains to sweep in preparation for her visit, but that these clean floors were a norm of his household. However, her bare feet might pose a problem, as they might render her more perceptive to even the barest hint of dirt, and thus raise her standards of cleanliness. In this scenario, he worried that she would find fault in his rug. He had not bought a vacuum and feared that she would be able to feel the grit of his carpet's intricate weave with her bare soles. Considering the impossibility of finding a vacuum on such short notice, as well as the metrosexual stigma surrounding house slippers, he decided that his best course of action would be to do away with his carpet altogether. Thank you.
My name is Gus Massinides. I'm from Camden, and I'm reading an excerpt from a fiction piece called Sundowning. Dennis Mora had been forgetting himself for some time now. It was growing increasingly apparent that he hadn't aged into his late 70s as gracefully as his wife, Eileen. Most mornings when he woke up, he rarely knew where he was, and on one occasion, he asked Eileen what was in his hand as he ate a peach. He sat at the small side table that was shoved into the corner of the kitchen, spinning it in between his fingers like a globe, illuminated by the loudly humming fluorescent lights that feverishly bounced off the linoleum. She answered him, saying simply, it was a peach. He took a bite, juice streaming down his chin and forearms, and she couldn't help but be reminded of a child, of her younger brother being sent outside by their mother, yelling at him that he knew better than to eat fruit indoors that would drip and stick onto her countertops. Dennis picked at the insides of the fruit and turned to her confused. He asked what the hard thing in the middle was, and she told him it was the pit. He stared at it, a wrinkled stone like a brain, withering away slowly and even slower. Every Friday evening, Dennis would bake a loaf of bread for them to eat over the next week. This last time, he made a complete mess of the kitchen, had forgotten even how to make the dough, something he had been taught by his father. Ever since they had started dating, she had had to prod information out of Dennis about his father. There was very little that he offered up willingly, except the bread. He always talked about the bread, how his father baked most nights, how he watched him pull armfuls of loaves out of the oven and dump them over the dining table, lit only by candlelight. It would pile up, never eaten fast enough, growing moldy and blue as each day passed by. But on that Friday evening, Dennis moved around the kitchen uncertainly, knocking over the bag of flour, forgetting how much water he needed, and pouring in far too much salt. Eileen watched with an ache in her bones. He was lost in what once had made him so happy. A ritual that had been repeated over and over, hundreds and hundreds of times over the years, and now it was slipping away, and she didn't know what to do. In the early hours of Saturday, she awoke to the absence of his soft snoring. She patted the bed, her fingers searching the soft flannel sheets. They were cold and untouched. She paused, long enough for the panic in her body to bloom, before hearing, faintly, the shuffle and dragging of feet across kitchen tiles. The light above the stove was on, and he was there, just standing and staring at the oven. His gaze was glassy but intense. He shifted his weight onto either bare foot, making squeaking sounds on the tile. She wanted to watch him, wanted to understand what he was searching for, but there was something unsettling about it. When she could no longer bear it, she approached him and took him at the elbow, guiding him back to bed with no resistance. And in the morning, when she told him what happened, he stared at her confusedly, unable to remember, his eyes empty. The next night, he did it again, and again the next. The cycle worsened over the next few weeks, small moments of forgetfulness evolving into these unnerving episodes in the kitchen. She began to do her own research, spending hours of her day Googling and reading about dementia. Dennis's mother had had dementia, and she discovered that a person was almost twice as likely to have it if their parent had also had it. She stumbled upon the term sundowning, the phenomenon of increased delusions at night that people with dementia often suffered. At first, he would do what he did that first night, staring at the oven like a stranger. But soon, he started spending hours rifling through the cabinets and drawers, possessed by a manic obsession, searching for ingredients. Eileen was increasingly shaken each time and found herself staying awake at the little table every evening, transfixed by the mess on the counters, ruined dough peeking out from old pans, waiting for him to walk into the kitchen once more. Thank you.
That is not easy to do. Let's give another round of applause to our writers. Thank you so much for coming. We have another reading at 7 if anyone would like to stick around. Otherwise, have a great night. Take a look at the back of your little card with all the writers' names on it if you would like to support the department. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.